Our correspondent in Kyiv, Emmanuelle Chaze, and also Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor here on set. Let's start off with you, though, Emmanuelle. Zelensky sounding relatively positive there about Trump's efforts.
Well, Zelensky basically just shared with Ukrainians and with the world the fact that Ukraine has been informed on what would come next. And that means that Ukraine is not part of what is being decided between Washington and Moscow, but is simply a spectator of what is happening here. And that's problematic here in Ukraine because it raises a lot of questions about what would a peace entail. And people here are very worried on three fundamental things on which Ukraine was not ready to compromise. It is its independence, its sovereignty, as well as its territorial integrity. And we've heard from Pete Hegseth yesterday that Ukraine's territorial integrity, as recognized by international community up until now, it includes the regions that are currently under illegal Russian occupation. So its territorial integrity, as we knew it pre-2014, is something that is very much what Ukrainians are asking themselves. Will Ukraine ever recover its territories, the regions of Luhansk, Donetsk, Crimea, but also the partially occupied regions of Kharkiv, Kherson, and Zaporizhia? So there's a lot of questions there and a feeling of betrayal this morning. I was talking to Ukrainians here in Kyiv, in the streets, and they really feel let down by Washington. They really feel that the decisions that are being made about them are being done without them, and that's very much the feeling we're noticing here today.
Well, listening to that is Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor. Rob, that's the reaction from Emmanuelle there. I mean, what do you think about Trump's phone call? I mean, what do you think we should take from it, bearing in mind what they've said afterwards?
I think it's really difficult to say at this stage, as with virtually everything that Donald Trump does. I mean, the first thing I would say is it's just the opening gambit. It's the first stage. The notion that it's possible to strike a peace deal with Russia without the participation of Ukraine or the European members of NATO, I think is ludicrous. Ultimately, it's impossible. You know, on the question of 2014 borders and NATO. The first thing I think to say about that is the NATO remark by Hegseth was made in the context of the peace negotiations. What he was saying is that NATO membership would not be part of the peace negotiations, not that Ukraine would never have a road to NATO membership in the future. So it's an important distinction, I think. And the second thing, on the 2014 borders, you know, in many ways, I think you can say he's only stating the obvious, something that President Zelensky has himself said in recent times, that Ukraine is not in the position to retake the lands lost to Russia, in Crimea in particular, at the moment, but that it won't renounce its sovereignty over those areas. And that wasn't what was being referred to here. The question of sovereignty was not being referred to. The question being referred to at the moment is the deal that will be struck. And like I said, this is just the first play. You know, this is Donald Trump trying to muscle his way into the center of the action. But you know, he knows, just as Peter Hegseth knows, actually said, you know, Ukraine must remain sovereign and prosperous with robust security guarantees, not provided by the United States, I hasten to add, but by the Europeans and others. But clearly thinking in those terms that there have to be security guarantees, robust security guarantees. Now, the problem for all this, though, is that, you know, as Donald Trump is about to find out, I'm sure, once these negotiations on peace start to get going, is that the Russian perception of what a peace deal should be is completely different from anybody else's. You know, the starting premise of Russia is that Ukraine doesn't have a right to exist. So at what point is Donald Trump's patience going to run out? At this stage, you know, like I said, this is just the beginning. It doesn't seem to me that Putin or Russia is ready to make any sort of concessions at this stage. They talk in terms of ultimatums, not in terms of what concessions could be made. And that's going to get them nowhere.
Well, let's go back to Emmanuelle in Kyiv. Emmanuelle, I'm sure you were listening intently to what Rob had to say there. I mean, it is incredibly complicated and incredibly complex, isn't it? But what do you think the people in Ukraine there, you mentioned you've been talking to some of them, hope might come out of this?
Well, I think what they hope now, they are looking towards Europe, and they're really looking towards what will be the next steps taken, not just the declarations of intentions, just as we saw from the Weimar Plus format. France, UK, Poland, Italy, Germany, they've issued a statement saying that they were standing firm on their support to Ukraine and on respecting its territorial integrity, its sovereignty, its independence. But for Ukrainians who live under daily bombs sent by Russia, for Ukrainians who have to defend 1,000 kilometers plus long front line, words are simply not enough. They want to have safe skies, they want to have peace. Nobody wants to live in peace more than Ukrainians themselves, but they want a just peace. They also want to be sure that should any ceasefire be agreed upon, should any peace talks start, they would be included in the conversation, and also they would like to see a long and lasting peace. And as Rob mentioned just earlier, Russia is not seemingly interested in a lasting peace or in even stopping this war. Russia has brushed off President Zelensky's words when he said that he was ready to consider a territory swap. We know that Ukraine still has some control over part of the Kursk region in Russia. It would very much like to exchange it for Ukrainian territory currently illegally occupied by Russia. So far, Russia has shown no dispositions to stop its aggression towards Ukraine. And what's also very dangerous in what we see from Trump's discourse at the moment is that Washington's policies completely align with the Russian discourse, completely denying, in effect, any agency to Ukraine to decide on its own future.
Yeah, Rob, we were talking earlier on to our correspondent Dave Keating, who was at those NATO talks in Brussels, saying that not only Ukraine, as Emmanuelle was saying there, but actually the whole of Europe and the whole of NATO worried that they could well just get squeezed out of these talks.
Yeah, I mean, but ultimately, I think it's highly unlikely that the United States is going to attempt to go down that path. It doesn't make any sense, firstly, because Donald Trump, is always saying that he's the master of the deal. He's not going to throw away his strongest cards right at the beginning of any attempt to secure a deal with Russia. So he's not going to pull the plug on Ukraine. He wants to put pressure on Russia to come to the table and make concessions. He knows that he won't get Russia to agree to concessions. So right from the outset, he starts excluding from the process the Europeans and the Ukrainians. He wants to bolster Ukraine at this stage and ensure that Europe is in the game. Otherwise, his own hand is weakened. So my feeling is it's extremely unlikely that Donald Trump will move down that path so early in the negotiations.
Rob, thanks very much. Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor here on set, and also joining us there from Kyiv was our correspondent